All right, a lot of information there. Let's do a couple example problems. So we have in which interval will the answer theta equals inverse cosine of negative 0.4 be? Remember, this just means cosine of what angle gives me negative 0.4, and we're just trying to figure out which quadrant will theta be in. So you first think about old stuff. Where is cosine negative? Which is in the second and the third quadrant, because cosine is x. X is negative there. But then you ask yourself, what were our range restrictions for inverse cosine? And your answer to that was the first quadrant and the second quadrant. And so the overlap is the second quadrant. So your answer is 90 to 180 degrees. All right, try another one. Inverse tangent of negative 0.9. So again, you ask yourself, where's tangent negative? Tangent slope, so it's negative where the slope's negative, so in the second or the fourth quadrant. And then you talk to yourself about inverse tangent, and its range were restricted to the first and the fourth quadrant. So right away we can get rid of anything. So we know we're in the fourth quadrant because it overlaps, so we can get rid of anything that's not in the fourth quadrant. All right, now we have two options. Is it A or B? Because both of those angles are in the fourth quadrant. So then you have to remember that inverse tangent's range was defined to be negative 90 degrees to 90 degrees. And so numbers that fall in this range do not fall in the negative 90 to 90 range. So it has to be answer A. All right, let's try another one. If you think you know how to do this, stop and see. We are now moving to radians. So you see right away it's positive and kind of nice. All inverse trig functions, if it's positive, if it's a positive ratio, you know you've got to be in the first quadrant. And so right away our answer's first quadrant, 0 to pi halves. Next one, inverse sine of negative 1/2. Okay, still doing quadrants, so I would recommend you stop this, give it a shot, and restart. All right, so it's negative. That means I'm either going to be in the third or the fourth quadrant because sine is y. And because I'm inverse, I know I can only be in the first and the fourth quadrant, so my overlap is the fourth quadrant. So anything that's not in the fourth quadrant, okay, so this is in the first, this is in the second, this is in the third. We're left with two that are in the fourth quadrant, but again, remember the range goes from negative pi halves 2 pi halves, or negative 90 to 90, right? So right away we can say E's not going to work. Our answer is A. All right, let's do another one. Now we're moving to not just getting the right quadrant, but actually getting the right angle. So you have to be remembering your exact values again. So again, remember this just means cosine of what angle equals negative root 3 over 2. Before, this had two answers, but because it's inverse cosine, there's only going to be one answer because we define inverse cosine that way. So we are looking for negative. So right away, that should tell me I'm in the second quadrant because that's where cosine's negative and inverse cosine's range restricts us to B. And then you say, okay, which angle when I take cosine of it gives me root 3 over 2. So my adjacent side's got to be root 3 over 2. And hopefully we remember that our adjacent to our 30-degree angle is root 3 over 2. So we're looking for a 30-degree angle in the second quadrant, which gives me 150 degrees. Okay, try it again. If you're good at your exact values, pause, stop, make sure you can do these. All right, so I start with the negative root 3 over 3, and it's being tangent, so it has to be in the fourth quadrant because it's inverse tangent, which is in the first and the fourth quadrant, and because it's negative, we have to be in the fourth quadrant because the slope of that line is negative. Then we need to say, okay, which angle is it? Gives me root 3 over 3 when I take tangent. So we need our opposite side, right, and our adjacent side, but hopefully we remember that it's 30 degrees because opposite 30 is 1, and tangent would be 1 over root 3, which when you rationalize it becomes root 3 over 3. So kind of the nice thing about inverse tangent is because the range is restricted to be negative 90 to positive 90, we don't have to go figure out what that is equivalent to as far as using a reference angle and taking it away from 360, right? We know right away that the answer is just going to be negative 30. And it's actually more helpful when you deal with radians. All right, like this one. So, but first quadrant right away, so we know anything that's not in the first quadrant is not going to work. None of those are in the first quadrant, so we know it's A and D. Now, your test might not be multiple choice, so you can't necessarily eliminate like that. But you're looking for sine of what angle gives me root 2 over 2. And hopefully we realize that that's your 45-degree angle in your first quadrant. But we can't use 45 degrees because you don't see 45 degrees, so we convert. Hopefully we know that 45 degrees is pi over 4, but if we don't, we multiply it by pi, divide by 180, and reduce our fraction, and we'll get pi over 4. All right, stop the video, pause, try this one. All right, now we are at negative, so we're in the fourth quadrant because it's y, and it's inverse sine, so it restricts us to the fourth quadrant. We know that opposite the 30 degrees is 1/2, so we know our reference angle is 30 degrees, but unfortunately we're not in degrees, we are in radians, and so we ask ourselves 30 degrees in radians is the same as, and again, I'll just show you what we do if we don't know these, but I would encourage you to memorize them by now. So 30 and 180 reduces out, and you have pi over 6. And the nice thing, like I said before, you don't have to take 2 pi and minus pi over 6 to figure out what my reference angle is. It's just strictly negative 30 because now we're going clockwise. So negative pi over 6 is my answer. All right, hopefully that is enough. Give these two on your own a shot and we will catch up with it tomorrow. Have a nice night.